In this lesson, we will be adding control events to our 3D scene that will make the layout much more interactive for the operator, with no scripting involved. We're going to be covering loops, pauses, update points, and triggers. To get started, the first thing we're going to do is add a pause point to the main timeline. This will allow the operator to control animating the lower third on and off. Load the scene that you created in the previous lesson. We will begin by extending our animation so that the lower third bars animate off. Position your scrubber in the middle keyframe of the bars, and click the pause button. You will see a marker appear on the control actions section of the timeline. Now let's save the scene and take it to air in G-Scribe. You will notice that once the pause point is reached, the animation will pause. To resume the animation, hit the take button again. When a pause point is reached in a timeline, all events on that timeline will be stopped. Pauses will only affect the timeline that they are attached to. Only pauses on the main timeline can be triggered by the operator by hitting take. The next thing we want to look at are tag update actions. Tag updates allow you to choose a point on your timeline when new tag values are applied to the scene. Each CG page created using a 3D scene can have its own unique tag values. This can be used to create intelligent scenes that can interact from page to page. The first step is to add a tag update point. Move your scrubber to the end of the bar animations. Click the Add Actions button. This will open the Actions menu. There are several different types of actions that we will be covering, but for now, we want to choose the Update Content action. This action is used for updating text tags. You can choose which scribe files and tags you wish to update at a given point. We're going to update all of the tags. The transition effect allows you to choose how the tag update will be applied. Because we are going to do the tag update when the text is not visible, we will leave the transition as a cut. Click the Add button to apply the action to the current frame. The action list will show you all of the actions applied to this frame. Click Done to close the window. Notice there is a new action marker on the timeline. The next step is to add a loop to the entire main timeline. Make sure that the update action is inside of the loop. The loop is required so that the scene loops back to the beginning of the timeline on each take. You will see the bars animate off, and then back on because of this loop. This allows the scene to be dynamic and use multiple CG pages. Let's try it out in G-Scribe. Save your layout. In G-Scribe, we are going to create 2 pages based on our scene. Each page will have different tag contents. Begin by importing the scene and adding some tag values. You can easily create a new layout by simply dragging and dropping the scene in the playlist. Add some different tag values to the second page. Select the first event and take it to air. Notice that it pauses at the pause point we created. Now select the second event and take it to air, without clearing the first event. Notice on your output that instead of taking the second CG page from the beginning, the scene actually resumes from where it was and animates off. When the update point in the timeline is reached, the tag contents are updated. Because we apply the loop to the scene, the bars will animate back to your output channel, only now the new text will be applied. You can create as many pages as you want based off the same 3D template, and trigger them to air in any order. The next thing we will add is an exit animation. The exit animation will be used when we have finished triggering our lower thirds, and want to animate the entire scene off of our output channel. Begin by selecting the camera object. Create a keyframe outside of the main loop, Then move the scrubber another 30 frames. Then apply an X rotation to the camera. Moving the camera position is an easy way to animate scenes off of air, without animating the individual components. However, you can choose to animate the scene off of air however you would like. Let's save and return to Gscribe. Take the scene to air. Notice it behaves the same as our previous test. When the animation is paused, press Ctrl-Enter. Ctrl-Enter instructs the animation to unpause and break out of the current loop. In this animation, you will see the layout begin to play again, but instead of looping back to the beginning of the scene, the timeline will continue, and our camera animation will play, moving the scene off screen. Next, we will focus on triggers. Triggers can be used to cause timelines and other actions to occur based on a trigger. Triggers can be fired manually by an operator, or they can be fired by a specific event on the timeline. To start, we are going to create a new timeline. On the new timeline, we are going to create a live bumper object that will animate up and down behind our lower third bar. For help on animating the bumper, please see our previous lessons. Add a pause point to frame 1 and to the middle frame of your new animation. It is important to remember that when working with multiple timelines, all the timelines will play simultaneously when a layout is taken to air. By adding a pause point to frame 1, we are telling the scene not to play this timeline, unless a trigger unpauses the animation. Next, we are going to add a trigger to the pause point that will allow the user to control when the timeline will play. Right-click on the first frame marker and select Edit Actions. Click on the pause action in the action list. Make sure that the Resume Playing on Triggers option is selected, and then assign a trigger name in the Add Trigger box. You can use any trigger name you wish for the layout. Click the Add button to apply the trigger, and then click the Update button. You will now see the trigger listed as a parameter for this pause point. Click Done to close the window. Next, we want to repeat these steps for the second pause point, only this time we will call the trigger Live Off. We have now created our two pause points and assigned triggers to them. The final step is to apply a loop over the entire timeline so we can display and hide the live bug as many times as we want. Let's try the triggers in Gscribe. When you load the scene into Gscribe, you will now see the live on and live off triggers in your trigger list. Begin by taking the layout to air in the normal way. Notice that the live bumper is not displayed, because that timeline is currently paused. Select the Live On trigger and click Fire Triggers. Your live bumper will animate on. Fire the Live Off trigger to hide the event. Because we put the timeline in a loop, you can fire these triggers as many times as you want. There is one problem that we still need to solve with our animation. Put the live trigger on screen, then hit the Take button to animate the scene off air. Notice that the lower third animates off screen, but the live bumper remains. We want to make sure that if we animate the lower third off air, that the live bumper does not remain. To fix this, we are going to add a trigger to our main timeline. Move the scrubber to a position just after the pause point, and click the Add Actions button. Set the action type to Fire Trigger. You will see all the triggers currently used in the scene are listed. You can also add your own name if you wish to fire a trigger that is not part of this scene. Select the Live Off trigger and click the Add button. This will add the trigger to your action list. Note that you only need to select the global option if you wish to fire a trigger outside of the current scene. Click Done to close the window. You will notice a new action appear on your timeline. By adding this trigger to the timeline, every time that point is reached, a trigger will be fired. If the live bumper timeline is waiting on the second pause point, it will be unpaused. By doing this, we can ensure that whatever the main animation is animating off, the live bumper will do the same. Save the layout and try it out in G-Scribe. Load the scene and take it to air. Manually fire the Live On trigger. Next, hit the Control Take button to animate the scene off of your output. Notice that when the bars animate off, the Live Off trigger is automatically fired from the timeline, causing the live bumper to animate off. In this lesson, we have covered using pauses, loops, update points, and triggers. These actions can be used together to create extremely dynamic scenes that can interact from page to page.